American West. Its grit and grandeur have long inspired American dreams. Home to our nation's first peoples and generations of pioneers. Home to nature beyond compare. Home to the American spirit. Its beauty will take your breath away, and its dangers will try. A place where life is lived close to the land, in concert with the untamed. Behold, a storied land of American heroes and a destination of dazzling cultural richness. Behold, a living tradition, the James Museum of Western and Wildlife Art. The James Museum is built on the passion of two collectors, Mary and Tom James, Chairman Emeritus of the international financial services firm Raymond James, headquartered in St. Petersburg. For more than 3 decades, the Jameses have been devoted collectors of Western and wildlife art, inspired by Tom's childhood fascination with cowboy lore and Mary's love of skiing in the American West. First housed at Raymond James headquarters, the collection drew visitors from across Florida and the U.S. as it grew. Today, the James collection includes more than 400 premier works from the James 3,000-piece collection, ranging from expansive paintings and life-size sculptures to exquisite handcrafted jewelry. And now, it has a museum home to match its wonders.
It wasn't really a collection that was meant to be a museum collection, but the art got better and better as time went on, and people have basically been coming from all over the state to see it for quite a long time now.
The majority of the museum's artworks are by living artists who the Jameses believe strongly in supporting. Works in the collection span diverse styles, from realism to pop art, and represent the perspectives of native and non-native artists from the American West and beyond.
I mean, education is a big part of a museum's mission. I want to really educate people about this Western movement and about the Native Americans that were here. I grew up playing cowboys and Indians out back. The first movie I went to was a Western movie. In those days, we became very interested in the movement west and what happened, and we learned something about it in school. And in most places in the United States, they don't teach it.
Let's get started in the museum's distinctive Sculpture Arroyo.
History has always been a great feeling for me, because if you can feel what somebody did 100 years ago, 200 years ago, and in those circumstances, you realize that we're still the same. The circumstances have changed, but not that much. It's not just the history, it's about the feeling of what it was about to be an American. And it's very complex. It was very romantic, and it was very brutal at the same time. When I started my career, I studied anatomy, and then I studied body language, and I studied choreography. I studied why do certain gestures work in certain cases. When is a gesture overkill, and when is it stated in the right context? If I was a Native American, I think my art would look different. I don't think it would have the same historic sense to it. And I'm very keen on the idea of being able to create work that is historically accurate and reverent to these people.
In the galleries, the living heritage of Native American art continues to evolve in dialogue with contemporary art.
My work derives from my culture, which is Hopi and Tewa, Native American culture. But at the same time, I'm living in this day and age that is modern. What I do sometimes with my work is I'll break down the imagery into just pure contour lines and abstract some of these images and these forms and symbols. There are those that will see an exhibit that I would have, and I'll say, oh, this is a Native American because it's so abstract or so contemporary. But at the same time, It's really coming from my culture.
The Wildlife Art Gallery features animals of the West, but also the great creatures of the world.
When you see a gorilla in the wild, there's something about its presence that is kind of awesome. You can't explain it to somebody unless they've actually seen a gorilla in the wild and it's staring back at you. It's that sort of look when they lean forward and they're looking at you. And you wonder what they're thinking. Are they wondering why I'm here?
And I think something that makes our paintings different and unique is they tell stories. Especially in a lot of John's paintings, the predicament is the hunter is in trouble. It's not the animal.
We treasure the wildlife that we paint. We honor it by painting it, and we want to preserve it as long as we can. And preserve it, as Susie said, for our, the next generation.
Finally, visit the Jewel Box to find dazzling works by Native American master jewelers.
When I was raised by a grandmother, they were traditional, very traditional people. They really pushed me hard to make sure I understood what the colors meant. The four sacred colors, the different dancers. My mother comes into my dream and says, here's a bear. This some tools that you can use to design a bear. All the native people throughout the Southwest, bear was their leader and their respect, the father of the forest, and all kinds of way of teaching. If you're disciplined enough and you practice it, it became ritual. Ritual and spiritual are one word. Isn't that amazing? Because if you're spiritual and you become ritual, those two words become one.
Throughout the museum, you'll discover many more treasures and stories of America's Western heritage, the fortitude of its people, and the integrity of its spirit.